Welcome everyone to the Unboxing Careers podcast, where we shed light on what different careers are really like so that you can choose a career you will really love. Today we are diving into the public safety communications field with Barry Furey. But before we do, let's talk briefly about unboxing thoughtful gifts. At thoughtfulcollection.com, you can shop from a wide selection of curated products you can feel good about, helping you express friendship, gratitude, and love. The next time you need to, don't just gift, give thoughtfully at thoughtfulcollection.com. Where do I go? How do I know what I should do? All right, I'd like to welcome to the show Barry Furey, previous public safety professional and current public safety consultant. So Barry, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, sir. My pleasure.
And I didn't realize until we were chatting just before we started recording here, we are like 20 minutes down the road from each other. So we could have probably done this at a coffee shop or something.
Well, that's correct. I did not either, but it's nice to see a neighbor.
Always good. Always good. All right, Barry, let's start with this. I mentioned public safety communication, pretty broad words here. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about what types of roles that might entail for someone?
Well, it can encompass several things, but the basic one that I'll be talking about today is basically the 911 call taking and dispatch portion, where calls are received from the public, properly screened, and dispatched to the appropriate emergency response agencies, or perhaps if they are non-emergent, given a referral to call someone rather than send a fire truck or an ambulance or a police officer.
Excellent. And many roles, not all, but many of the roles we talked about on this podcast so far is the traditional college to career type model. These are roles that it doesn't necessarily need to follow that model. So it's and different career path. Can you talk a little bit about what that typical kind of navigation might lead into if you're looking to get into one of these?
Sure. Basically, there are perhaps a few departments nationwide that do require an associate's degree, but the vast majority and bulk of communities that I am aware of require a high school diploma, and in many cases that can even be a GED, where GEDs are accepted. Governments will normally accept them for this position. You have to be, in many cases, 21. However, again, because there are 50 states and there are almost 6,000 different 911 centers in the country, each one may have a slightly different set of requirements. So there are some communities where you can start at 18. So again, if you're looking for a job, it really kind of falls upon you to take a look at your area, your hometown, the towns or counties surrounding you, and see what their requirements are, because they differ vastly. The one thing that most are pretty well set on is there may be a limitation to the criminal activity that you have been found guilty of, and still be able to get a job in 911. Basically, in most places, if you've committed a crime and been found guilty of that crime as an adult, and again, not as something as a juvenile that probably may not be discoverable, you likely will not be hired. However, if you have a couple of traffic tickets, you're probably going to be okay. But again, that depends upon the state, and in many cases depends upon the agency itself on what their requirements are.
Okay. And is it really just as simple as going on, looking to see if they're hiring for that field and sending an application in, or is there a little more involved to it?
I will tell you, these days, with the shortage of telecommunications personnel nationwide, it has gotten a lot easier. It's estimated there are about 99,000 to 100,000 911 workers nationwide. Right now, according to a survey by the National Emergency Number Association, NENA, who are a a group that supports 911 functions, uh, about 82% of 911 centers nationwide have reported that they are short and hiring. So if you are looking for a job, now is the time to do it. Most require that you uh, send in a resume. Uh, Many require that you take a pre-hire test to check for aptitude. Along the hiring process, depending upon where you are at, there may be psychological evaluations, there may be a criminal background check, there may be some other tests that are in there. But again, all these tests should be paid for by the hiring authority. This is nothing that an applicant should be asked to pay for themselves.
Okay. And any reasons why you think there's such a shortage? Is it people don't really know how to get into it? They don't know it's a viable option for them? Is it qualification driven? Maybe it's pay driven. Any theories to why we're seeing such a shortage?
It is a little bit of everything. I will start out by saying this job is not for everybody. It is a very high stress job. There are long, irregular hours. The pay from starting ranges from the lowest I've seen on ZipRecruiter was $11.30 an hour, but the average salary is low $40,000 range to start off with. So that's kind of out of the range. But what we're dealing with is, well, in the past, a lot of people used 911 or communications work as a stepping stone to become a firefighter or a law enforcement officer. Those are the kind of the more attractive jobs. And so people stay, and they still do it. They stay for a couple of years and move on. So there's a constant churn. I will also be honest in saying this is not a job for everyone. You are working holidays, you are working weekends, you are working nights, you are missing a lot of social and family activities, but it's certainly a steady job. It is as recession proof these days as you're going to get. There are vacancies that I know of in every state of the union. So if you're thinking, hey, wait a minute, I'd like to move to Alaska, I'd like to move somewhere sunny, I'd like to move someplace where I could ski, get online and look, because I guarantee you're going to see openings.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm assuming benefits and all that come with it too, right? So because these are state departments, right? So you're getting state benefits. Is that? Or...
Oh yeah, and it again is kind of agency specific, but just like
Okay.
working for any government in a state is a little different. We talked about the Raleigh and Durham areas. Well, Raleigh benefits may be a little bit different than Durham, but there are still benefits. So that's one of the things you will find out if you go out and look and apply. What are the benefits? And typically there's health care benefits. There's a couple of weeks of vacation a year. Maybe a uniform allowance. I've known some that even give tuition allowance. So really, go out and look and compare and shop around if you are really interested in the job. You know, look at that. The one thing that my agencies have always done in terms of looking at jobs, if we bring you in because you are interested, we are going to require that you have a sit-along in the center itself for at least half of a work shift to see if you really like it and for us to see what your interest level is. And I will be honest with you, I have had what I consider to be good candidates after they spent 4 hours in the center say, is this what you do? We didn't realize you were talking to people who were, getting shot at or had an emergency or were in a fire. And we're kind of like, well, that kind of comes with the job. And they're like, well, thanks, but no thanks. So again, that's another thing. When you're looking, even if it's not offered, ask if you can sit along in the center for a shift or a half a shift and get an idea to see if you really feel you're cut out for that type of work, because you don't know until you try.
Yeah, Very much so. So you mentioned a couple different things. I was going to talk about work-life balance. You mentioned atypical hours, things like that. So you kind of jumped the gun on that one. You mentioned also high stress situations, right? People are calling an emergency line because of something. Most of the time, there is an emergency, different severity level. Let's, if you can, because you have experience with this, walk through like what a typical day or week might look like. So,
Oh,
you,
certainly.
yeah,
You will have periods of extreme boredom merged with extreme periods of hell. You can go, and it depends on where you're working. If you're working in the big city, the downtime is significantly lower than if you've gotten a job out on the prairie, where at night the only thing out are the prairie dogs. Bottom line, if you're working in a New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, or even mid-sized cities like Raleigh and Durham, there's activity around the clock. So again, it depends on where you get your job, the level, and again, the type of activity. You're going to see, obviously, crimes, fires, medical calls are going to occur wherever you work unless you get a job for a dispatch center that only deals with specific types of emergencies. And there are such animals out there. There are ones who deal with just fire calls, for example. They're there. But generally, no matter where you are, you're going to get people who are sick, people who have gotten something stolen from them, uh, people who wake up and find their loved one is not breathing, people who look outside and see the baby in the pool, people who wake up and smell smoke. Two, the opposite side of the coin, where people are complaining that the garbage man made too much noise with the garbage cans. The neighbor's dog is barking. Somebody parked their car 6 inches over their property line. So it can be from the ridiculous to the sublime. You can work a shift and go home and say, man, I feel like I just came in because I didn't get off. I didn't even eat. I didn't get off the phone. I didn't do anything. It's been crazy. And sometimes in the middle of the night, you're going to be sitting there and like, hey, is this thing still on? Because it's just going to be dead. And again, you deal with family crisis. You deal with weather emergencies. Uh, any story that you see on the evening news that deals with a fire or an accident, or probably even heavy traffic. Somewhere along the line, a dispatcher or call taker has touched that piece of information.
is having a lot of empathy a good thing for someone in this position, or does that kind of come back to hurt you a little bit because you might be too empathetic to situations?
That is a real interesting question. I never wanted to hire anybody who didn't have a certain degree of empathy because your job in emergency communications is to help the person on the other end of the phone get through their problem, get through their emergency. But there's a balance. You don't want to fall apart the first time you hear, my baby's in the pool. I mean, and he's not breathing, because that happens. You're going to get that. And as time goes on, that is likely going to become more important because I predict that we will see a shift to video calls to 911. Just as people will start to move to video calls between themselves, eventually that will go to 911. And already I know people who are like, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for that. Well, no, you didn't. But guess what? Technology changes, and
Yeah.
within the next, I'd say, decade, we're going to see video calls go to 911, and then you're not only going to have to listen to the horrendous emergency that's going on, you're going to see it. So that's going to make some changes too.
Do any of these agencies that you've worked with or consulted with or anything, do they offer either as one of a perk, I guess it's a perk, of any sort of mental health counseling? Either privately have mental health days where they have onboard staff that kind of work with people?
Yeah, almost all of them.
Okay.
I can't speak for all of them, but any of them that I have worked for or have done consulting with me offer some sort of counseling service to their individuals. And it is typically part of their health medical insurance plan that, yeah, there is counseling. The other thing is that other services may bring in specialized crisis counselors who deal with nothing but public safety emergencies or even religious counseling. I know many departments around here have chaplains who will come in not only to the police officers, firefighters, EMPs, but also to the dispatchers and telecommunicators to say, hey, wait a minute, let's talk about what you just went through because it's serious. So, yeah, and that is getting to become, I think, even more apparent, more offered than it was in the past, because when I started in this profession, it didn't matter where you were. It was like, that just comes with the job. Suck it up. And
Yeah.
now it's a little bit different. Like, well, wait a minute. We kind of got to decompress some of these people who are put in those situations.
So these are really high intense situations, can be, but it's probably going to be the overwhelming majority, which are going to be more difficult than less difficult, maybe is a better way to say it. Uh, you've mentioned some of the things about the challenges of it and kind of know what you're getting into. What'd you like most about your time working there?
Number one, you are helping people. And if you are working in a 911 center or a communication center, whatever you want to call it, you are helping people while not being exposed to the elements. When you are a first responder, you are out there in the mud and the blood and the rain and the snow. You are helping people here sitting on your butt. And so it's the safest way to do it. Secondarily, I never had a boring day. No day is the same. There's always something different. There's always something new to learn. Wait a minute, I've never had a call like this before. What's the policy manual say? Oh, gee, policy manual doesn't cover it. Okay, so now what are we going to try to do to figure out to help this person? So, yeah, you're going to be called upon to help. These days, I will also say that there is overtime out there if you want it. You can make a pretty good, while the base salary may not be great, with the amount of overtime that's available in almost every jurisdiction, you can make yourself a pretty decent living, and you're helping people while you do it. And that's the bottom line. This is one of the best ways that you could help people, and it also caters to or is available to people with certain physical limitations. If you can't lift 40 pounds, well, you might not be able to be a firefighter because you got to lift the hose, you got to carry equipment. But you can sit at a desk and still save a life. And so that, I think, is something good for people who are like, I don't really want to get shot at. I don't want to go into a burning building. I don't want to get blood all over me. You can still help from a safe spot.
So you mentioned something there, Barry, about, hey, I never got a call like this before. And you always hear, whether you're watching Dateline or any sort of these, news shows, the 911 operator is always very cool. They're calm. They're collective. They always know what to do. Stay by them. I'm assuming there's a level of training that happens for new employees and things. What happens? Like, how do you resolve the situation when you do get a call that you don't know what to do?
Well, that's a good question. Number one, and it depends upon the size of your center. In a larger center, there will typically always be a supervisor or supervisors on duty. If not, even in smaller centers, there is typically somebody who's been there longer than you who may have actually, no, wait a minute, I had that. I know what to do. The bottom line after that, in a typical situation, as I tell people, you've got a 50-50 chance of guessing right. And if you've got any kind of training at all, that really skews the choice in your favor. So,
Okay.
Yeah, there cannot be policies written exactly for every permutation of every situation there is. I remember when I was director in a area in Tennessee, we had a private airplane crash in the middle of the night, get stuck up in a tree. The pilot was dead and the passenger was still alive. Now, I guarantee you there wasn't a policy in the book that dealt with that situation, but yet the people on duty got the right help out there, rescued the person who was injured, took the necessary arrangements to handle the body of the deceased. Next day, got the plane down out of the tree when there was no emergency, but there was nothing specifically that dealt with that. So you've got to think on your feet or on your seat, depending on how you want to think about it, and think about, all right, what have I got that's close to this is going to work? And you surely either yourself find it, or there will be somebody, hopefully in the center, that will find it. Or if push comes to shove, you have radios in front of you that connect you to every public safety official in your jurisdiction. You can get on the radio and say, hey, wait a minute. We just had this come in. It's not in the book. How do you want to handle it? And the people in the field can help.
Oh, perfect. Would it be safe to assume, I don't even know if that's the right way to phrase this. You mentioned the ability to kind of think on your feet. Is critical thinking more important than adaptability? I know sometimes those things will overlap, but like what
Oh
maybe what is the better
boy.
way to ask is like what are the main skill sets that would make for a good responder?
All right, that's good. And well, first of all, some critical thinking is important. We'll go back to that. Now, some agencies have little to no procedures written down, so you are completely on your own there. That goes the opposite of that are agencies that have a lot of things written down, that train regularly on those things, that also have tools in place that are nationally recognized tools. And for example, there are things called EMD, which is Emergency Medical Dispatch, which provides you with a list of questions and guidelines. And it's sort of like Boolean logic, like if then, okay, if somebody says this, then we do this. If they say that, then you tell them to do that. And those guidelines exist for all three services, EMS, fire, and police. Here's the questions to ask. So a lot of people, through their training, go through, okay, here are the questions to ask during these scenarios. And the first thing is, all right, ask basic questions on all calls that help you recognize what that scenario is. You've got to figure out when somebody calls, you've got to take control of that call because people are going to be wandering off with a bunch of information. Well, I saw this guy outside of my house and he looked just like this guy I saw when I was in Atlantic City. Wait, whoa, that's not going on now. So you've got to teach people to take control of the call, to ask the right questions, and whether those questions are scripted internally by a list that says, hey, find out. And it's almost like the newspaper man's questions or newspaper person's questions. Okay, what, where, when, why, who, how. All right, what's happening there, which helps us, number one, deal with the level of emergency. Is this something that you need help right away or can it wait? Deal with, hey, is anybody injured? Because that's a big deal no matter what the category of the call. Yeah. Is anybody got a weapon that somebody who isn't injured may get injured if we don't get out there quick? Is something on fire? We think we better send a fire truck then if something's on fire. Well, yeah, but okay, well, what's on fire now? Because that's going to determine how many fire trucks we send. So yeah, all these things build up, and on really critical calls, uh, help is often on the way while the caller is still on the phone. And that's one of the things that we have to explain to people, is that they're going to be asked a lot of questions when they call 911 to try to determine the exact nature of the response and who to send to best help them. And a lot of people don't realize that, and we have to stop in the middle and say, well, help is on the way. We're trying to ask you some more questions so we know exactly who to send more, if we have to send more, or to tell these people who we sent what's going on so they know what to look for when they get there. So it can get complicated.
So you mentioned, Barry, your favorite part of the job. I'm going to ask you on the flip side, what was your least favorite part of the job?
Oh, the least favorite part of the job. I mean, there are several. Spent a lot of time away from my family with all the work I had done in the past, as a telecommunicator. Also, even that carried on to when I was a director, in that my wife was a week away from delivering our daughter when a tornado hit the neighborhood to us here next door, and I left her locked in the bathroom and went into work because I knew as director I was going to need to be there because the city was facing a significant emergency, and they were. So, it's nothing that you do in life is, roses. I think as a young person, the thing that you probably miss most is that you work a lot of holidays, you work some inconvenient times for your social life. But on the other hand, you are also off at times when many other people may not be off. And I can always remember as a young dispatcher, when I was working 4 to 12 around the holiday season, 9 o'clock in the morning, I'd be out doing Christmas shopping, and I could shop until 3 o'clock in the afternoon and then get ready to go to work. So that was great. There weren't a lot of crowds, and I was getting a lot of stuff done. So there's good along with the bad.
Excellent. And how about, you mentioned the shifts there for a minute. I neglected to ask you this before. So with the shifts, is it something where you're hired for like an afternoon, a graveyard shift, whatever, and you stick there? Is it seniority based? How does that generally work?
It really depends on where you work. A lot of departments rotate weekly, bi-weekly. Some people work 8-hour shifts. Some people work 12-hour shifts. And of course, then you work less of them in the week. Some people work 10. Some people work a combination. There's all kinds of schedules. Many times, initially, when you are hired and put in a training academy for agencies that do have a training academy, that work is pretty much going to be Monday through Friday during the day as you learn the basics. And in many academies, that will be for several months because, believe it or not, there is that much material to go through: a radio procedure, computer procedure, the laws that affect dispatching, community geography, things like I talked about, these programs that help you with medical, fire, and police dispatch. All of those take weeks to learn. So you are oftentimes in training for weeks before you actually see the inside of the 911 center.
Gotcha. How about some misconceptions, Barry, about working in this industry?
Well, I guess if you want misconceptions about public safety, you can watch any TV show about that branch of public safety and get them. You know, 911
So,
out
so
there.
Reno 1, it's not doing it for us.
And no, it's not doing it. I mean, way back in the old days when you had Rescue 911 with William Shatner, and they were showing you actual synopses of calls that went on, we in the industry were okay with that because it was like about 80 to 90% realistic, and the only drama was stuff that they threw in to kind of make it interesting. Yeah, and we can live with that because the story from A to B worked out. But I mean, the real misconceptions are that you've got a lot of time and all these resources that they show on TV for you to sit in the 911 center and solve the crime. That's not happening because you know what? Because the phone's ringing and the next caller with a true emergency who needs you is going to be there. You don't have time to worry about the call that's fast. You're worried about the emergency that this person is telling you at that second. So I think that's the true um, the difference between real life and drama.
Excellent, excellent. And how about something about the industry? I mean, you've been doing this for a long time, consulting with it. Think about kind of going back your first couple of years and then looking back and going, man, I wish I knew this sooner. What would you think that? What would you say
Oh,
that thing was?
I think all of us in the industry would have loved to, and we didn't, and they're still not, get a handle on technology before technology got the handle on us. There was little to no input and control from the 911 side when technology evolved in the telephone industry. We went from telephones that were connected at the end of a pair of wires that we knew in the World Trade Center, we could tell you what office, what desk that phone sat on in a 101-story building. Okay. Now all of a sudden we got cell phones. We have no idea where that caller is at. And so then it got a little bit better. Okay. Well, it's within this circle of that cell tower. Well, again, you know, if the World Trade Center happens to be within that circle of that tower, it doesn't do us a lot of good. So we would have loved to be able to get a jump on technology rather than technology getting a jump on us. I mean,
Very
even
good.
here locally, the change of the area code, when we became the 919 area code, we literally received, and when you went from being able to just dial the number to having to dial the area code as part of that change, we literally received tens of thousands of false 911 calls by people. Oh, I got to call my aunt. 911. Oh, no, click. And then we're calling her back. And it happened every time, every hour of every day, and people still have not 100% gotten used to it. I would like to lynch whoever thought it was a good idea to make 919 an area code.
That's unbelievable. So I don't know when that came into existence. I mean, I've been living here for 13 years. It's been 919 since I've been here. So I'm assuming we're looking, I mean, years ago, right?
Actually, I was still active when it happened, so it's about 15 years ago when they made the split and the switch. And my friends who were actually ran the center in Durham, they had the same kind of fun with it that I had too. So.
Excellent. Barry, asked you a lot. You gave a lot of really practical and insightful things, which I love, even the bad side to it, which is what we want here. I don't know. This world is completely foreign to me outside of knowing that 911 exists and dispatch exists. What did I neglect to ask you today that you think anyone listening is important for them to know?
Well, I guess the thing would be for anybody who thinks they have an inkling and an interest in this job, even if they say, I like this job, but I'd also like to move to another state, get on the web and look. Organizations like NENA, the National Emergency Number Association, NENA.org, or APCO, the Association of Public Safety Communications Officials, that's APCO.org, or even governmentjobs.com out there, websites. Get out there, look, or find your local government website, whether it's a county or a city, and take a look at their job section and see what's out there and available and put in an application. And like I say, if they don't offer, ask to go down and have a sit along and see if you like it. And you might like it. And certainly right now is a prime time to put in an application, because there are thousands upon thousands of vacancies nationwide, and you can probably find one near you or in a community that's your dream destination.
So I thought of a couple of different questions as you were giving that answer there, Barry. So bear with me here.
Sure.
Do they, from your experience, if someone is, say they're a senior in high school, they're going to graduate either diploma, GED, whatever it is, they think they might want to go into it, but they don't have that diploma yet. Will these agencies, from your experience, let people do like a 1 hour sit down there, or do they have to have an intent to actually apply for a job?
I think it's case dependent. And the other thing is that we have given tours to civic groups in the past, to many different civic groups. So the thing is, if you are at all interested, even from just that, gee, wait a minute, I'd kind of like to see what it is, find the non-emergency listing or business office listing for the dispatch center in your area and call. I mean, the worst they can say is no, but most of the times they will try to work something out with you.
Actually, and my second question to that, which is not really related, but say, I know transferring in the real scheme of things, you're going from state to states or county to county, so different jurisdictions, whole different world here. But from your experience, say hey, I'm going to move in a year. I'm going to go to something a little more of a climate weather, or more of a like medium weather here. So I know I'm moving in a year, but I think I want to do this. Does it make sense to jump into it now? Does that make the quote unquote transfer easier later?
Well, I will tell you that, number one, it will make your transfer easier because agencies would typically give some preference to folks who have demonstrated that they could do the job. Okay. Number two, from an administrator's standpoint, after I've just spent 6 months to train you and you are running out the door another 6 months after that, I'm going to kill you. So, and that is the honest to God answer, that yeah, it will help you get a job somewhere else. It will, especially if you're good, it will raise the ire of your former employer. So that's the honest answer.
Fair enough. All right, Barry, I'm going to ask you to choose a different career you think you'd be happy in, and it can't be related to one you're currently in. What do you think you would choose?
Well, I guess it depends on how related you want to talk about it. I have been a fire officer in 3 different states, independent of the 911 center, the fire chief, been a deputy chief, been a training officer in fire departments in 3 states, and that would have been a career, some sort of medical career. Again, but there's probably a tie in there. So I guess I would have to say that I would have been a writer, because as it is, I am a contributing editor for Firehouse Magazine. I've written some books that are, again, industry related, but that writing, had I taken a different path, the writing would have taken a different path too.
Very good. So I love your first answer. You just love helping people, Barry. That's what I'm gathering from this, right? Which is great. The world needs more people like that. So, Barry, thanks for your time today. It was a pleasure having you.
You're welcome.
I learned a ton. This is super fascinating.
Well, great.
So, if someone has a question for you, Barry, they want to find out more about you, your consulting services, whatever it is, what's a good way for someone to get a hold of you?
Very easy. Barry Furey, BarryFurey, BarryFurey.com. That's my website. There is a contact form on the website. Fill it out and I'll get back to you.
Love it. So we'll link all that in the show description as well. So if you missed it, just head on down there. You can get an easy link there. Try to link the resources you mentioned as well, Barry. So we'll try to put all that in a single place for people. So Barry Furey, everyone. Find out more about Barry. Like I said, check out that episode description. Like me, hope you learned something on today's episode. If you want to explore other careers, share your career with us. We'd love to have you. Please just check out our website to find out more. And until next time, be kind to one another. Unboxing careers, unboxing.